Okay, we're on page 21. This is chapter 4, verse 7. I'll show you how a Rashi of 4 words in Hebrew can open up a whole verse, open up a whole context. So, as you know, we mentioned last time, Cain brings an offering and Abel brings an offering. God accepts Abel's offering, not Cain's offering. And Cain is very upset. This annoyed Cain exceedingly. I think the author, the English writer here is from London. He's exceedingly annoyed, you know. He wants a gun. Get me annoyed. And his countenance fell. He was both angered and depressed, which is something to master in psychological state. And Hashem said to Cain, "Why are you annoyed or angered, and why is your countenance fallen? Why are you depressed? Surely, if you improve yourself, you'll be forgiven. If you do not improve yourself, sin rests at the opening." Not door, but opening. The word in Hebrew is Pesach, not Delas. And the word Delas appears in the book of Genesis. So Pesach is very misleading if you translate it as door. So the rest of the opening. Its desire is toward you, yet you can conquer it. Now, there's a problem in logic here, a problem in structure. If you improve yourself, you'll be forgiven. If you do not improve yourself, then what? Hello, let's try this again. If you improve yourself, you'll be forgiven. And if you do not improve yourself, then you'll not be forgiven. If A, then B. If not A, then not B. What do you have here? If you improve yourself, you'll be forgiven. If you don't improve yourself, sin's resting at the opening. That's if A, then B. If not A, then Q. What has sin resting at the opening got to do with anything? And furthermore, which opening is that? What kind of opening is it, you know? Opening to your bank account, you know? There's no balance here. Rashi says 4 words. The Pesach kivracha chata'acha shamur. At the opening of your grave, your sin is preserved. How does that help? What did that do for us? Okay, now let's start again. If you approve, you'll be forgiven. If you approve, when?
During life.
Till next Tuesday? You know? On the 3rd Thursday of the 4th month? Till your 73rd birthday? Until when do you have to improve so as to achieve forgiveness? The answer is, as he just said, your whole life. So, if you improve in your lifetime, then you'll be forgiven. And if you don't improve in your lifetime, then what? Then you escape because you're dead. It's all over? No. At the entrance, at the opening to your grave, your sin is preserved. You'll be punished after death. So Rashi answers 2 questions with 4 words. Opening of what? The grave. And that restores the balance. If you improve, you'll be forgiven. And if you don't improve, you won't be forgiven because your sin will be preserved for you at the entrance to your grave, and you'll be paid after death. With those 4 words, Rashi answers both questions. And he reveals something very important, that a person can fix up what he has done in the past at any time in his lifetime. Of course, that doesn't mean a person should be blasé about it, and it is a bit ignoble and degraded to think, well, you know, I'll do it when I'm 67. But it works. It definitely works. And our understanding of tshuva is exactly that way. A person who does tshuva on his deathbed can expiate his responsibility for all of his failures. So that's just an insight to the way Rashi's logic works. And I should also tell you that these stories, these are the beginnings of human history. They're singled out this is 1/1,000,000,000 of 1% of human history is recorded in the book. All the rest is just let go to entropy, despite chaos theory. And it must be teaching us something important. You find with the nuances that the very important principles are embedded in these stories. The fact that you can repair what you've done and that you have your whole lifetime to repair it is a fundamental Jewish teaching, and it follows from the way Rashi explained these words in the verse. You together? Okay. Next is 4:16. Okay, this is very interesting. So now, let me change my glasses so I can see. So let's go on. Cain spoke with his brother Abel, verse 8. It happened within the field. Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Shem said to Cain, "Where is Abel, your brother?" And he said, "I do not know. I'm my brother's keeper." We spoke about that two times ago. Then he said, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Therefore you are cursed more than the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, shall no longer yield its strength to you. You shall become a vagrant and a wanderer on the earth." Cain said to Hashem, "Is my iniquity too great to be borne?" Which the commentators take as at least partial admission of guilt and at least a partial move in the direction of tshuva. I agree that I've sinned. I'm not defending myself. I'm just asking whether you can't bear it, whether you can't sustain me in spite of it. "Behold, you have banished me this day from the face of the earth. Can I be hidden from your presence? I must become a vagrant and wanderer on the earth. Whoever meets me will kill me." Hashem said to him, "Therefore, whoever slays Cain, before generations have passed, he will be punished." And Hashem placed a mark upon Cain. Mark of Cain. This plays a role in the theology of another religion. The mark of the murderer, the mark of God's vengeance, the mark of God's dismissal of him and detachment from him. But then the rest of this verse is a little funny. So that none that meet him might kill him. God put a mark on Cain so that those who meet him will not kill him. He said, "I'll be killed." It seems like God is putting a mark on him that he shouldn't be killed. So what kind of gesture is this? Is this God sort of casting lightning bolts on him from the heavens and burning him up? Doesn't sound like it. Sounds like he's protecting him. Now let's take a look at Rashi. 4:16. He inscribed on his forehead a letter of his divine name. Okay, other editions of Rashi add another interpretation of whoever will find me will slay me. This refers to cattle and beasts, since there were no human beings in the world of whom he might be afraid except for his father and mother, and of course he did not fear that they would slay him. So who is he worried about? Who's going to kill him? The animals. He said, "Until now, the fear of me was on all the animals," as it is written actually prior to this in the Torah. The fear of you shall be on all the beasts of the field. When Adam was created, it says that he'll rule over all of the creatures, and they'll all be afraid of him. That's before he sinned. That's before he ate from the tree of knowledge. Now that's been lost. Now, however, because of my sin, and he in particular, the animals no longer fear me. God immediately set a sign for him. That is to say, he again made the animals be afraid of him. Cain could see, now they're afraid of me, the way it was before. The Ramban here offers a suggestion of his own, that when he set out on a journey where he said that he was afraid of being killed. When he set out on a journey, he felt divine guidance leading him which way he should go, and because of that, he knew he wouldn't be killed. All of these have one theme. There's an extraordinary divine kindness for the murderer. I think that should be registered. When I went to university, the freshman year, everyone had to take the world history course from a fellow named Edgar Johnson, who conducted the classes by reading from his book. It was assumed that we were either all illiterate or all too uninterested to read the book ourselves. So therefore, he just read from his book. And I remember the Hebrew God of vengeance raining down wrath from heaven and destroying his enemies, and which he pronounced with great drama. Like, this is before I was religious. And I said, okay, he's a professor. I guess what he's saying is right. No, it's not right. It's wrong all the way through the book. Here you see at least a little gesture of it, how God is treating the murderer. Okay. 420. Let's see if you can pick this up on your own. This only goes back a few days. Cain left the presence of Hashem and settled the land of Nod. Okay. Okay, look at verse 19. Lamech took to himself two wives. The name of one was Ada, the name of one was Tzila, and Ada bar Yaval. He was the first of those who dwell in tents and breed cattle. Shepherd. He's the first. First shepherd. Really? He's the first shepherd? Hello, didn't we learn about a shepherd 2 days ago? Yeah. Who was that? Huh? Yeah, what about Abel? Didn't he raise animals? Yeah. Wasn't his sacrifice from the best of his flock? So what does it mean that he's the first? So look at Rashi, 420. He was the first of those who pastured cattle, and he dwelt in tents, a month here and a month there, on account of the pasture necessary for his sheep. For when the grass was finished in one place, he went away and pitched his tent in another place. Up until then, you had a ranch. And on the ranch, you had certain area that was under your control, and the animals grazed on the area, and you stayed home, thank you. He was the first one who practiced nomadic pasturing, where through a year you would go from place to place where the pasture was richer, and you may spend the whole year on the road and come back only at the end of the season. So the point here is to explain why he did something new that wasn't done before. Yeah.
Was this like a sort of a good night, like to say like before you could just stay around and everything was good. Now you have to go from place to place.
That's an interesting question. Let me think about that for a second. Is this now somehow a bad development? By the way, I should have mentioned it, maybe it's obvious to everybody, that the curse on Adam was the curse on a farmer. You know, if you have a herd of goats, they will eat the thorns and thistles. They're not afraid. They'll be nourished that way. It doesn't bother. They can eat tin cans also. They're omnivorous. Be careful to eat your finger. Raising animals wasn't affected, obviously, by the curse. There's the whole thing about the nature of farming. The fact is that the patriarchs were all shepherds, except for one period in the life of Isaac where he practiced agriculture for 1 year. So is this, I don't know, because shepherding in this way was very common. It was very common in societies all over the world. So is this like a degradation, or is it that when you do it this way, you get much better results? So it's just worth it, you know. And they had a free market in those days, you know. You want to work, we'll pay you. If you don't want to work, don't bother. Okay. Now, okay. Now we're going to skip to the begats. This is the boringest stuff in the Bible. Oh, this one got that one, and that one got that, but it's all gold. It's all holy, and it's all gold. Page 25. You have a whole list of generations here, and the structure of each generation is exactly parallel, with one exception. Take a look at starting with verse 6. Shais lived 105 years and begot Enoch. That's verse 1, the first of the three, the trio. How old was he when he begot his designated successor? Not everyone agrees that this was the first child. It was a designated successor. And Shais lived 807 years after begetting Enoch. He begot sons and daughters. That's the rest of his life. And the third verse sums it up. And all the days of Shais were 912 years, and he died. That threefold structure repeats over and over again. Enoch lived 90 years and begot Canaan. Enoch lived 850 years, 15 years after begetting Canaan, got sons and daughters. All the days of Enoch were 905 years, and he died. And so it goes. Until you get down to the bottom of the page, we have Enoch. 21 at the bottom of the page. Enoch lived 65 years and begot Meshuselach. Okay, that's the first of the trio in all cases. Enoch walked with God for 300 years after begetting Meshuselach, got sons and daughters. So it doesn't say he just lived. No, he walked with God. Okay. All the days of Enoch were 365 years. Okay, that's almost. That's the third verse. Should say, and he died, but it doesn't. It stops there, end of verse. And now comes another verse. And Enoch walked with God. What do you mean? You told us that 2 lines above. You thought we forgot? We just said that. And then he was no more. What mysterious words. Was no more. Disappeared. For God had taken him. Doesn't say he died. So there's something strange going on here, which isn't true for any of the previous generations, and it's not true for the coming generation either. So don't tell me that it's the end of an era and a transition to a new era and so on and so on. Baloney. Look at the next page. Meshuselach lived 187 years, begot Lamech. Meshuselach lived 782 years after begetting Lamech, got sons and daughters. All of them Meshuselach 969 years, and he died. That's back to the triple form. So it's not the end of an era, it's not the coming of a new era, not a major transition. No, it's something which is unique in the whole list, different from everything else in the whole list. Now, what shall we make of it? First of all, how long did Enoch live? 365 years. Does that stand out in some striking way? How? How does it stand out?
Considerably shorter than
It's like 600 years shorter than everybody else. That's all. Just, a loss of 600 years. Does that sound good?
No.
Doesn't sound good to me. It does sound like it requires some explanation why he got shortchanged 600 years. Does his walking with God have anything to do with the fact that he got shortchanged? Is walking with God good? Sounds like it's good. Is it the best? Is it comparable to something else? All these questions now Rashi addresses in his comment. 524 on the handout. Enoch walked with God. He was a righteous man, but his mind was easily induced to turn from his righteous ways and become wicked. He was righteous but weak. He was easily pushed, easily affected. The Holy One, blessed be He, therefore took him very quickly and made him die before his full time. This is why Scripture uses a different expression when referring to his death by writing, and he was not, meaning he was not in the world to complete the number of his years. We had a guy here many years ago, 35 years ago, maybe more. He came here for a summer program, and he was very deeply affected by his 8 weeks here, and he resolved to try to live a Jewish life and stand right. He went back to where he was in university someplace or other, and quite quickly he lost it all. Fine, the next year he came back and stayed for a year. And he learned, he was reasonably intelligent, and he got into it, and he was doing, and he was enthusiastic. And then he went back, and within a few months, he lost all of it, again. And after that, I happened to meet him in America, and I said to him, "What's with you?" And he says, "I cannot be different from my environment. I can't do it. When I was with you, I was like you. When I was on them, I'm like them. I can't stand against my environment. I just can't do it." I said, "Well, then you're not a vertebrate, you're a jellyfish. You can cram a jellyfish into a cube or into a sphere, or he has no bones." I said, "Doesn't augur well for your future in terms of marriage and having a job and being a citizen and so on and so on." I don't know what happened to him afterwards, but I remember feeling sorry for him. He could not hold his own. Now that's the way Rashi understands he walked with God. It's like the Medrash says, a man walking with his son in the forest, as long as the son is holding his father's hand, then he's happy, he's comfortable, he's not afraid. But if he should need to be separated from his father, he'll go to pieces. Here, he needed God's constant support, God's constant protection, and the generations were deteriorating, getting worse and worse, and it got to the point where he simply wasn't viable anymore. And the commentaries do say that God took him alive. Whether he did die or didn't die is an open and interesting question. Now, if you look at it carefully, I think you can see, if you look at in the verse, I think you can see this, because as I said to you, it says he walked with God twice. So you have to ask yourself, why does it say it twice within 2 lines? So I think the way to read it is this. 22 says, Hanoch walked with God for 300 years, that became Meshach Selach, God's sons and daughters. This is the quality of life that he had. Quality of life he had was walking with God, whatever that means. All the days were 365 years. And Hanoch walked with God, and then he was no more. His walking with God is the reason why he was no more. When the Torah tells you A happened, and B happened, and C happened, and D happened, it's not just a list of events that took place. Usually it means they're related, that the one is a reason for the other, the one is the cause of the other, and especially when it's repeated. The Torah already told you that the quality of his life was a walking with God quality. And now it says he walked with God and God took him. So what it's saying is, this walking with God is the reason why he took him. It's because without walking together with God, he was helpless, hopeless. There was nothing he could do. And that being the case, he took him early. And this is what Rashi is explaining to us. Okay. 29. Yeah, we're on page 27 now. Finally, we get verse 28, the birth of Noah. This, of course, is the introduction to the account of the flood. Lamech lived 182 years. We got a son. He called his son, he called his name Noah. This you don't have in any of the previous ones. You don't have in the previous ones that he named his son, just as his son was. He calls on Noah, saying, "This one will bring us rest from our work and from the toil of our hands, from the ground which God has cursed. In other words, he was moved to give him a name with a prediction. Now we have it as part of our tradition that when the parents, by the way, giving a name to a child is something which typically is done trading off, father and mother. They typically take turns giving names to the children as they're born. In the Tanakh, in the Torah, the vast majority of names are given to the children by the mother. Almost all the names are given by the mother. Very interesting. So here he's giving a name, but not only is he giving a name, but he's giving a name with a content. He sees that something's going to change now. The world is not going to be the same anymore. Noach, lanuach in Hebrew, means to rest. And as I told you in the Genesis story, it can mean just cessation of motion, but when it talks about going to give us rest, that means we are under pressure, we're tense, we're straining, and going to give us respite. So now let's see how Rashi explains this. This one will compass. He will ease from off us, which your translator will explain 5 lines below. So take the word and split it up between Yud Nun Ches and then Mem Nun Vav. Mem Nun Vav is like menu, from us, and Yanach. Nach means to be at ease, to be at rest, to be tranquil. He will ease from off us the toil of our hands. For until Noach came, people had no agricultural instruments, and he prepared such for them. That's one thing which the Midrash tells us. So Rashi citing the Midrash here to explain what the meaning of the word is that he was given and how he was described. The earth had brought forth thorns and thistles when they sowed wheat in consequence of the curse posed behind Adam Rishon. That's what God said to Adam after he ate from the tree. That's going to be thorns and thistles. They said, no, this ceased. So there was a double benefit. Agricultural implements were invented, which made agriculture much easier, much more productive, and the curse ceased. This is what is meant by the word Yinachamenu, as your translator here puts it in the parentheses, Yanach Menu, because that means that the root of the verb is Nun Ches or Nun Vav Ches. That's the verb. Now, you could have made a mistake here. You could have divided up the letters as Yud, Nun, Ches, Mem, space, and then just Nun Vav at the end. Then the root would have been Nachem, and the meaning would have been to console us, not give us comfort, but give us consolation in our pain, so to speak. So Rashi says, this is what I remember the word Yinachamenu, the way I told you, Yanach, space, and then Menu. If, however, you do not explain it in this manner, but from the root Nachem to comfort, what would be wrong with doing it that way? It's all the same letters. You just put a space in a different place. Rashi says, because then, in terms of grammar, the name to the boy would have been wrong. He shouldn't have been called Noach. Then the meaning you give to the expression connected to the idea of comfort will have no application in Noach. You would have had to call him Menachem, comforter, because then you use the whole root of Nachem. Noach would not have been the appropriate name. So, taking the word Yinachamenu and deciding where to divide it and how to read it is settled by the name that was given to the child. And you see that it was comfort and not consolation. And the difference then, historically, is gigantic. You give consolation to a person who's lost something. It's over. The relative is buried. And you comfort him in his pain and loss. That's not the meaning. The meaning is there was relief. Things got better. Things really improved. So it's a gigantic difference in how you take it. And Rashi is careful with the grammar to show you how to take it. Okay, now 532. Okay, so now we're starting the next. Oh, why did I leave this Rashi out? Okay, maybe I'll put it in for next time. So, he's the offspring of Noach. Noach was a righteous man, birth of generations. Noach begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Yefes. Now, these 3 are mentioned quite a few times, and they're not always mentioned in the same order. So Rashi says the following. From this, I think we can learn 2 things. Was not Yefes the oldest? So why then is it mentioned in the name, putting Shem first? But you naturally first interest yourself in Shem, who was a righteous man, who was born circumcised, and from whom Abraham was to descend. So here, the Torah puts them in the order of prominence, of centrality, of greatness, of nobility. So Rashi is telling you 2 things. First of all, order matters. This guy's got 3 sons, so he mentioned them. What difference does it make? What order you want to mention them? No, the order matters, number 1. And number 2, the order might reflect different concepts. It could be chronological, or it could be something else. But that means whenever you have a list in an order, you ought to ask, why is it in that order? Rashi's telling you that's always a matter of interest. And in this regard, I want to make a remark. What happens when Rashi doesn't say anything? Does that mean there's nothing to say? Does Rashi take his commentary to be exhaustive, explaining everything that needs to be explained? Certainly not. Certainly not. How do I know that? Because on a few occasions, Rashi says, I don't know how to explain this. Of course, you have to ask, why did he say it then and not other times? But from the fact that he says it, it's clear that he knew that there were things that he wasn't able to give insight into. So when Rashi doesn't say something, you don't conclude that my question, if I have a question, is a stupid question. Not necessarily. It could be, but not necessarily. And then you go look at other commentators to see, or whether the commentators on Rashi comment here and say why he didn't say anything. But here, Rashi's telling you, order always matters. I would say that not every commentator would agree necessarily. There are different standards for what counts as a significant piece of information that needs an explanation. So it's important that Rashi's on record here that order does matter. Okay. Now, I don't know why I did it in this order. I guess I got a little bit mixed up. Go back to page 27. What did I write here? Why did I say this? Yeah, that's 6:2. Came to pass, when man began to increase upon the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of the rulers saw that the daughters of man were good, and took themselves wives from whomever they chose. Now I want you to know that in the Hebrew, the word is B'nai Ho-Elohim. Person hears that and he says, hey, wait a minute, Rabbi. Doesn't Elohim mean God? So what is this really? And then you have your favorite academics who say, well, you see, there were ancient myths about gods and man, like in Homer, the Homeric poems, right, and the heroes and everything else. And the Torah took those myths and sort of sanitized them and purified them, made reference to them for those who know, and for those who don't know. And and you could take it one way and the other way, and they have this whole song and dance that they do, with drums and whistles. And although Rashi does, in a midrashic sense, mention something like that, but here, look at what Rashi says at the bottom of the page, and then I'll explain to you why he says it. The sons of princes and rulers. Now, I think that in terms of pshat, Rashi is forced to say this, because go back to the text. came to pass that when man began to increase on the face of the earth, daughters were born to them. The sons of rulers, and the daughters of men were good, and they took themselves wives from whom they chose. And Hashem said, my spirit shall not contend evermore concerning man. I'm not going to put up with man forever. Oh no, there's a limit. Since he's by flesh, his days shall be 120 years, meaning the species. 120 years to a flood, right? Now, let me ask you a question. If B'nai Elohim referred to the offspring of the gods, the greats and so on and so on, and they are victimizing the human beings, they're taking the women without permission, whomever they chose, why then would God declare he's got a limit to how long he's going to tolerate man? Man is the victim here, not the perpetrator here. Man is not the criminal here. Why would the result be a judgment against man? That just doesn't make any sense. And the truth is, it repeats. 4. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, which literally means the fallen ones. And also afterwards, when the sons of rulers, again, B'nai Elohim, would consort with the daughters of man, would bear to them. They were the mighty of old, were men of this station. Okay, it's again B'nai Elohim. And the next thing is, Hashem saw the wickedness of man was great upon the earth. Every product of his thoughts of his heart was but evil always, and so on and so on. If you think the Nephilim are the fallen angels and so forth and so on, in Pshat, it just doesn't work. Because the next judgment is man is criminal, man is corrupted, and man's going to face a terrible calamity because of his crimes, because of his evil. So in Pshat, I think it's very difficult to see here a reference to heavenly forces and so on and so on. Midrash could do that. Midrash isn't tied to what the text demands in terms of its literal reading. And Rashi brings the Midrash. But the use of it here, it's not sanitized myth. That's just, one of the things you get when you go to academia. Yeah.
No, I don't have Rashi.
Okay, so Rashi goes on. Another explanation, the prince of the angels came as messengers from God. They too intermingled with them, the daughters of men, whatever that might mean. Wherever the word Elohim occurs in scriptures, it signifies authority. This is the key insight. What does the word, in philosophy of language, one of the most basic thoughts is the difference between what a word refers to and what the word means. The meaning is the concept that it expresses or the quality that it expresses, and what it refers to is the object that it applies to. And you can have one thing with many different names because they connote different qualities. So you talk about the connotation and denotation. Connotation is its meaning, and denotation is what it refers to. So Rashi tells us here, and as a matter of fact, the Rambam agrees with it, many agree with this, that the word Elohim connotes authority. Now, authority is possessed in many different ways. The creator of the universe embodies the greatest possible authority. Rulers and judges also have authority. In a certain way, angels have authority because they carry God's command in them and they're carrying it out. So the word Elohim denotes sometimes God, the vast majority of the time, sometimes angels, and sometimes rulers, and sometimes judges. Because they all have the quality that the word connotes, which is authority. And he brings a proof of it, 2 proofs, where you shall be his master. This is a very indicative verse. God says to Moses, take the Jewish people out of Egypt, be my agent. And Moses has 1,000 objections. And finally God says, okay, you won't do it alone. Aaron will be with you, and you'll do it together. And he says, he will be your spokesman, and you will be his Elohim. You, Moses, will be Aaron's Elohim. Now, I don't think that Aaron confused Moses with the creator of the universe. I don't think he thought that his brother created the universe. But the word Elohim is that you're going to be his master, you're going to be the authority over him, you're going to speak with God's voice, you're going to communicate God's command, then you will have gigantic authority. And the word that's used for authority there is Elohim. Same thing with chapter 7 over the same thing. Okay, that's that. Now it says that they saw that the daughters of man were good. The word, yeah.
So when in the prayers we say Hashem or Elohim, is that the kavanah we have in mind, that Hashem is the authority of
That's right. He's the master. He's the authority. Sometimes Elohim there refers to the one who's in charge of all the forces of nature. But it means something which carries the ability to make things happen. That's one standard meaning of it, exactly. What does it mean to say that they saw that they were fair, that they were tovos, they were good, but they saw it? How can you see that someone's good? These are people who came to town, and they saw that they were good, and then took them, right? So he brings a midrash which says that this was. And by the way, we had this in the Hanukkah time. They were about to get married, so they were dressed up, and they were made as beautiful as possible, and they would come in and say, "Me first, me first." It's not the only time in history this has happened. So that's how they could see that they were good. This goodness was a goodness of appearance. And then Rashi brings the very bitter remark. Let's go back to the verse again. Chapter 6, verse 1. Man became decrease, face of the earth. The sons of the rulers saw that the daughters of man were good, and they took themselves wives, from whoever they chose. What does that phrase add to the story? They're the rulers, right? They took themselves wives. Of course, they took. They didn't ask permission. They didn't negotiate. They just took. What was it going to take? Ones they didn't choose? What does it mean from whomever they chose? So look what Rashi says. It's in addition. Even if it were a married woman, or a man, or an animal, they took whatever they wanted. There was no restriction whatsoever on what they did. Now this is one of many references to sexual aberration which took place in biblical history. And Rabbi Meiselman is fond of quoting a midrash which says that when we come out of Egypt and we're on our way to the land of Israel, and God says to us, "Here are my laws concerning sexual relations. Don't do as they do in the land of Canaan that you're coming to, and don't do as they did in Egypt." And the Midrash tells us that in Egypt they had an innovation 3,000 plus years ago, and that is, not only were they not restricted in partners for sexual relations, but they codified in the law the legitimacy of same-sex marriages. And the Midrash says that was the end. Once they did that, there was no way back. The conditions under which they were destroyed were tied up in Jewish history, but that kind of failure to understand the nature of the world, to live within the world the way it was created and for the purpose for which it was created, that failure already sealed their fate. And this, he said, like 25 years ago, when the question in the United States arose about legalizing same-sex relationships, and he said if they do that, they're courting terrible, terrible danger. Terrible, terrible danger. It's not a simple thing. It's one thing that people do something. I'll just add one comment here. Let me ask you a question. this is discussed in legal theory. Is there any positive virtue in a law that cannot be enforced?
No.
It calls into question the ability of the society to run its affairs, and it creates a backdrop of disregarding the law and so on and so on. The normal thought is you don't pass laws unless they can be enforced. So Dennis Prager, of whom I have a lot of critique, and I don't regard him as authority, but he did say something once which I thought was very clever. He said there could be a positive effect from such a law, that in a democratic society, it expresses the judgment of a large proportion of the population. So that when a person considers doing this, he knows a lot of people are going to disapprove. And that might make him think 3 times before he does it. And his example was a law against prostitution. There's no way to stop prostitution, as every human society knows from the beginning of time. But if a democratically elected legislature passes a law against it, that means a very sizable proportion of the population is against it. So when a person is considering whether or not to do it, he knows he's got to keep it a secret. He or she knows they've got to keep it a secret, because if it gets out, it will cause a terrible negative judgment on the person, and that in itself can be a disincentive. So it's not completely zero. It has negative effects, but it can also have positive effects. Yeah.
Also, sometimes when you leave, the effect of having a law that is unenforceable is one question, but also the effect of legalizing something or codifying something in law, that clearly has an effect
Absolutely.
on the culture, right? Because you see that clearly in Canada with marijuana, where it used to be something where only adults, and it was taboo. And when it became legalized, people thought, well, it's going to be taboo. No, it became so part of mainstream culture. Kids are doing it by the age of 14. Everybody, I just went to an election party, a campaign party, and in the middle of the campaign party, I had a big bowl of marijuana at a campaign party.
Sure, because how else are you going to get people to come?